Stop changing your workout routine more than you change your underwear. The constant switching between different workout programs, doing different workouts every week is one of the biggest reasons people don't consistently hit PRs and get strong as fuck. And I get it. Thanks to social media and really good marketing, a lot of people have been convinced that they have to confuse their muscles and that if your body gets used to something, you'll stop progressing. But the truth is, your muscles don't have a brain, so they can't get confused. So in this video, I'm breaking down why constantly changing your workout routines, your training programs actually works against you, and how long you should actually run your program based on your goal. So let's get into it. So here's why switching things up constantly actually works against you, especially when your goal is to get stronger. Because what most people don't realize is strength is a skill. It's a skill just like anything that you're currently good at. Think about the things that you're good at right now, things that you can do pretty well that other people maybe struggle with because they haven't had enough practice with it as much as you have, right? So think about those things and think about how you were when you first got started. You weren't great at it, right? But you got better with practice. You got better with repetition over time. Same thing with lifting. It's like learning a new language. So, say you wanted to become fluent in Spanish. You're not going to practice it one week and then the next week move on to an entirely different language like French. You're going to practice it week after week until it clicks. The same thing applies to compound lifts. The same thing applies to lifting. And when it comes to these compound lifts that you want to get really, really strong on, like barbell squats, deadlifts, bench press, variations of those things, you need to really fine tune the technical aspects of it. So when it comes to these bigger lifts, there's so much that can go wrong and so much that needs to be dialed in. You need to have the right setup. You need to be able to brace correctly. You need to make sure your bar path is right. The timing of certain phases of the lift are in check. You need to really pay attention to so much more that if you want to get stronger at these things, you can't just get stronger by just adding weight on the bar without having the skill honed in, right? So this is why it's literally like learning a different language or learning any other skill that you may be good at now but weren't good at before. And when you are doing these lifts, your brain has to learn how to send stronger and faster signals to your muscles in order to generate enough force to even be able to complete these lifts. But it doesn't happen when you're switching exercises all the time. Your body and brain doesn't get the chance to adapt. It doesn't get the chance to build that coordination and build that force production. And every time you switch things up, you're basically starting the entire process over. So, how long should you actually stick with your program before you switch things up? My rule for myself and my clients is at minimum 8 weeks, especially if your goal is to gain strength. If you really need variety and new things in your training program all the time to stay motivated, I would say 6 weeks is the bare minimum. But with that, you just have to know that you're not going to be able to get the most out of your lifts if you're changing them that soon. And this is where knowing your goal matters, because if your goal is to build strength, and when I say build strength, I'm talking about adding 50, 70, 100 pounds to your squats, your deadlifts, your bench over time, you need to keep those lifts in your program consistently because, like we talked about earlier, strength is a skill. And every time you add a new lift or add a new variation, your body goes through a learning phase. Your brain and your nervous system are literally figuring out how to coordinate that movement pattern that you just introduced. And until that's dialed in, you're not going to actually be getting stronger. You're just going to be getting used to the movement. So by the time you run it 6 weeks, you may just be getting used to the movement and now you want to change it. That's why constantly switching things up kills your gains when it comes to strength, because you never actually give your body time to master the movement. But once you do master the movement, then you can start loading it heavy and start chasing PRs. But that takes a longer duration than just 6 weeks. So if your goal is to build strength, 8 weeks minimum. And honestly, I would even say longer, but 8 weeks, you can see some pretty good strength gains. But if you want to really take it to the next level, you're likely going to have to run those a little longer. But 8 weeks is minimum. Now, if your goal is muscle growth, it's going to be a little bit different because muscle building isn't as skill dependent as maximal strength. Yes, you need to have good form, but you don't need to do maximal lifts. Like you don't have to do really, really heavy barbell lifts to grow muscle. You don't need to be doing repping out the heaviest you can lift for 3 or 5 reps. That's not necessary for muscle building. So you can get away with changing up your program a little bit sooner because the main drivers of muscle growth are proximity to failure, so intensity, how close you get to failure, volume, so how many reps and sets you're accumulating throughout the week at a good intensity, and frequency, so how often you're training your muscle groups throughout the week. So if you're someone who gets bored easily, you have a little bit more flexibility with exercise variations and changing your workout routine a little bit more frequently because you can swap barbells for dumbbells. You can change the angle of certain exercises. You can change machines as long as you're still training hard and following those 3 principles I just mentioned. And I did make a video that goes into those 3 principles a lot deeper in a lot more detail. I'll link it below. But with that being said, even when you're building muscle, you still don't want to switch too early because you still want to see progress on the lifts you're doing. So if you're changing up exercises really, really often, like every week, just for the sake of doing something different, that's just going to make it a lot harder. So when it comes to muscle building, give your program at least 6 weeks if your goal is to build muscle. And just to reiterate, if your goal is to get stronger, 8 weeks minimum. At the end of the day, all of this comes down to 2 things. Number one, knowing your goal. Number two, being real with yourself. And when I say real with yourself, I mean real with yourself about how you are willing to train. Because if you say you want to get stronger, but you can't stick to a program for more than 8 weeks, there's a disconnect, right? Because, like we said before, strength takes time, repetition, patience, because you have to develop the skills, same way you would develop any other skill that you're good at in your life. And I'll give you an example of this from my own training experience. When I first got into lifting weights, I thought I wanted to do a powerlifting competition. So I had a powerlifting coach. I was running a powerlifting style program, and I got bored by week 8. I just did not want to do barbell squat, bench press, and deadlift with a few accessories for 12 or more weeks. And I just didn't like that style of training. It's not that I wouldn't even say I didn't like this style of training. I just didn't like to train that way all the time. I like a lot more variability in my program in terms of the types of training styles. I don't have it in me to stick with that program long enough to actually compete at the level that I would want to compete in. I know powerlifting, you can pretty much compete at any strength level, but for me, if I'm going to compete, I want to be moving some impressive weight, and I just don't have it in me to train for that long with the powerlifting style program. I always have barbell lifts in my program, but I'm not going for maximal strength all the time. I'm not going to run the program long enough to even see the type of gains that I want to see. And that's not a bad thing. That's something I know about myself. But that's where being real with yourself comes in, because if you're telling yourself you want to get stronger, you want to see these numbers, you have to be able to run a program for a longer period of time than somebody who doesn't really care to see certain numbers, right? So you do need to be honest about you need to be honest with yourself about what kind of training you're actually willing to do and whether it matches your goal. With all of that being said, let's do a quick recap. Strength is a skill. For strength, you want to keep your program the same for at least 8 weeks. If your goal is to build muscle, you've got a little bit more flexibility, but you still want to keep your program the same for quite a bit of time. So 6 weeks at minimum. Progress comes from repetition, not random variety. So if you've been switching workouts every few weeks and you're saying you're not seeing results, it's probably not that your program sucks. It's not that your program is bad. You just haven't stuck with it long enough for it to work. So if this video was helpful, be sure to share it with your lifting buddy who you know has been changing their workouts more often than they've been changing their underwear. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and check the description for more videos that will help you optimize your training and build strength that lasts. With that being said, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Peace.